Last week I had the pleasure to be introduced to your child for the child case study activity. Now that I know a little bit more about your child, the goals you have for him or her, and a little bit about the 10 books you're thinking you're going to be using with them, now it's time to get ready to actually read. Now I have asked you to create what are called book responses, one per book that you read to your child. That means at the end of this project, you will have 10 book responses to submit to me. However, so much of this work regarding the book responses can be done ahead of time. In fact, it's recommended that you complete it ahead of time prior to reading with your student so you are prepared for that meeting. So let's talk about the book responses and let's get ready to read. First, there is an example of a book response template that you may feel free to use. It's not required, but it's something that I designed to assist you. That can be found in the Child Case Study content folder. Additionally, I have completed one example book summary that is also attached, so you can use it as a model as you complete your own book responses. The first thing you're asked to do is to create a book summary that includes citing the book in APA style. For those of you that don't already use OWL Purdue Online, that is a great website to go to for APA help. You can also use websites like EasyBib.com, or Microsoft Word also has a bibliography creator for you as well. But here's a model of what it might look like when you're citing your book in APA style. Next, as part of the book summary, you're asked to create a 1 or 2 sentence summary of the plot of the book. This will be helpful, so down the road, if you are a teacher or you're trying to pick out a book to buy for a niece or nephew's birthday, you will have a quick reminder of what that book is about. My favorite way to do a book summary is called Somebody Wanted But So Then. If you answer those questions about the book or complete the sentence starter that's provided, you have a concise summary of the book. So, spoiler alert, I'm going to use an example from Titanic. Somebody, Jack and Rose, wanted to escape their oppressive lives with each other, but their boat sank. Like I said, spoiler alert. So Jack ended up dying. Then Rose lived with her new life, but without him. Tear. So Somebody Wanted But So Then. A quick way in one sentence to summarize an entire 3.5-hour movie. To do my example, somebody within the book Start People is a Lakota Indian brother and sister wanted to play and see shapes in the clouds, but a fire raged while they were alone, driving them away from their village, so they became lost. Then their grandmother, in the form of a star person, came to guide them back home. Once you do your APA and book summary, then you're ready to start thinking about the questions you will ask when you're reading this book aloud. It's a great idea to pre-read the book and get an idea of what questions may come up and what questions you can ask the child. That way, when you're on the spot, you have something to draw from. So here are some examples of the types of questions you might ask to help them think critically about the book and its content. Maybe as you develop these questions, you're thinking about predictions. So based on the cover, what do you predict this book will be about? How do you know? Or predictions about their background knowledge. Do they know anything about Lakota Indians? Is there anything they want to know? That way they can set a goal while reading. Maybe you're going to ask questions in order to help point out the mirrors in the book. So for example, in this book, the grandmother helped when they were in trouble. Is the child able to see a reflection of their own lives in there? Who do they call on when they're in trouble? Maybe you're going to ask questions that help the child realize the windows. So for example, they have a very different family structure than your child might. Help them to point out those differences. Also, don't be afraid to help the child challenge the stereotypes that might be represented. So the stereotypes might be in the book, or they might be stereotypes or myths that we have in our idea of what the content should be. So is this how you imagine the natives lived? Is it different? What do you have to change in your mind as you think about Native Americans? And also challenging what's in the book. Do you think all natives actually dress like these children? Finally, the last types of questions that I absolutely love is to encourage the child to engage with the illustrations. So for example, if the children are looking at the shapes in the clouds, why can't the child do that too? Also, illustrations are a great way to help them make connections. This is what their house looks like. Is it different than yours? What's your favorite thing about the illustration on this page? If children aren't able to read, they're still able to engage with illustrations. So that's a great way to get them engaged in the book. Next, on the book response, I ask you to model making connections. So connections are exactly the way they sound. It's connecting the book, the text, what you're reading, what you're seeing, to things outside of the book, to go beyond the book. While there are many ways you can make connections, the three main ones are text to self, text to text, and text to world. So in your book response, I ask you to do all three. First, I ask you to write down a text to self connection. So how do you connect with this book, with the characters, with the illustrations? If you have this written out, you're able to draw from it when you're reading with a child in order to model what it means to make a connection to the text. When you're able to share those vulnerable connections, the child is more likely to do the same and to know how to do it. So I provided an example of my connection to the same book. Another way to do a connection is text to world. So I'm asking you to connect this text to future practice. For my future educators, that means how would you imagine using this book within your classroom? For my future non-educators, how would you use this book? For example, could you use it as a resource to inform others about challenging stereotypes or myths? Could you use it within a waiting room in order to engage patients for all my future doctors, nurses, and dentists? Could you use it as a gift for your own children, nieces, nephews, neighbors, and your friends' children at birthday parties? Is this a better way to give a gift than, like an Xbox game? The last part of the book response is leaving places for you to be able to record the child's reactions. Now, obviously, you're not able to write down the child's reactions before you actually read the book, but it's nice to have a form, a sheet, or a piece of paper with you to be able to record these things as you're reading, to jot down these items after you're finished reading before you forget them, or to even have some type of recorder where you can record the child's voice, not face, and be able to go back and write down quotes of how the child reacted to the story. So with that in mind, when you're recording after the fact the child's reactions, think about how are you going to write down their answers. For example, using exact quotes are really helpful. When I was doing a child case study for practice, I worked with a child named Molly, and she had a great quote that I really wanted to write down. I asked her what she predicted the book was going to be about, and she said stars and face painting and a fairy and maybe a boy that was sleeping, and as she was pointing to different items on the cover. I thought it was lovely, so I wrote down the exact quote. Also, I like to write down reactions. So for example, at one point in the story, Molly was really upset. I could tell because she was curling in close to me. She knew me, don't worry. And she was wrapping her arms around my arm. I had to even stop reading the book for a moment because there was a fire going on in it. And I had to explain that, yes, this is very scary, but this is just a story. This is not a real story. And this did not really happen. I had to explain that she was safe. And then she was able to express things like, I'm really sad for them. And she even started to get excited as she thought about, well, how can I help in this situation? So I recorded all of those items as different reactions she had. Also, are there any implications or inferences that you can make based on the child's reactions? So, for example, she kept pointing to the big sister and saying I or me as she explained her thoughts about the character. So I noticed, I could see there's an implication or an inference there that she was using this big sister character as a mirror because she saw herself in the big sister because she was one too. So this is her being able to make a window out of a book that was about a very different content area and culture than she was familiar with. I also recorded any challenges that came up as I worked with the child as well. For example, one of the challenges I had in working with her with Native literature was she had a lot of stereotypes based in the movie Peter Pan. So her idea of natives was tiger lily, this idea that they can wear feathers and they can fly. And even though the tiger lily couldn't actually fly in the movie. So with that in mind, that was one of the big challenges I kept coming across was helping her to disengage from this idea of natives being what she saw in Peter Pan and being able to see other authentic examples. So I just noticed that as I was jotting these things down during and after my interactions with the child, I was able to note these trends that kept coming up, and it helped me later when I wrote my child case study reflection piece. All right, so as we think about this, We are getting these different book responses ready ahead of time as much as possible, and we're also thinking about how are we going to record the child's reactions when we go to meet with them. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints about this assignment, I would love to hear them. I think this is a valuable learning opportunity, but I can't solve problems that I don't know about. So keep me in the loop and I will try to support you.